They started walking, slowly now, and Timo and Jonathan were led through the mountain. They could hear the two trolls talking quietly behind them, but they could not make out their conversation. Timo went through his pack and felt his water skin. It was still quite full, and he knew where he could find more. They were led down many passageways, and often the trolls paused and discussed which way to go, as they themselves were not familiar with the layout of the mountain. Soon they came to a large and bright room, lit with large cauldrons of burning fire tree sap. They burned bright and hot and illuminated the space. Here the fairies had not had time to take down their tapestries and pack their carpets, and the room still looked quite beautiful. To the children's surprise, they had been led to the new dungeons of the trolls, and there, in a hastily made cage of steel, lay their uncle, no longer unconscious, but his wounds now looking worse. Bold motioned to Timo to go to his uncle, and walked over to the troll guard who sat at a nearby table, unsure of what was happening. Timo gave his uncle a drink from the flask, which the troll guard objected to. "Wait," said Bold. It seemed he commanded some respect among the trolls, and the other troll waited. He then beckoned to Timo to give him the water skin. Holding it to the guard, he simply said, "Drink." Just as Bold and Maggot had been healed, so was the troll guard. He sat at his table and laughed, looking around and taking in his new world of color. "Stay here," said Bold to the guard. "Say nothing to no one about this until we tell the king." The guard nodded, still in disbelief and in his own way making sense of his new freedom. Eber was now sitting and fully healed of his wounds. Only scars could be seen where once were terrible gashes. He himself was completely perplexed as he watched his nephews looking relatively at ease and standing free among the trolls. Maggot opened the cage and let Eber out. He ran to his nephews. "What is happening?" he asked in amazement. "I found the waters," said Timo. "The trolls are being healed." Eber kneeled before his nephews in disbelief, gazing at the trolls, then back to Timo and Jonathan, and felt the scars on his head. "You two are something special." Bold took ropes and bound the three humans. "For your safety," he said, and they reluctantly accepted their binding. The trolls led them back into the tunnels. Eber was suspicious, but had no other choice but to be led through the mountain by the trolls, who were still heavily armed, holding long swords of blackened steel. They passed many trolls, who laughed and jeered at the three. If any got too close, Bold stepped forward, growling at them, saying, "These are for the king." After a while, they reached the long staircase that led to the king's chamber. "Do not speak to the king," said Bold. "I cannot protect you in here." He led them up the stairs, and they entered the king's chamber. They were met with a horrible smell that now even Bold and Maggot seemed to detest. The trolls had smashed the fairy king's throne and erected a large black chair of stone where the old throne had once stood. The room was filled with large cauldrons of burning fire, and it seemed the smell was coming from leftovers of what only trolls would consider a feast. Timo looked across to where the hidden door stood. It had not been discovered, but the statue's head had been knocked off and destroyed. In the room stood perhaps 20 large trolls, wearing black armor and holding spears and swords. They stared at Eber and the children as they entered and spat on the floor as they walked past. Sitting on the throne was a very, very large troll. He looked both fat and strong, and in his hand he held a 2-pronged spear. Above his head he wore a crown of rock. It was blood red and seemed to produce its own light from within. He smiled at the children as if eyeing his next meal. He held up his hand and the room fell silent. "Ah, our first lucky prisoners. But why are men and children in the mountain when all fairy filth have left?" Bold stepped forward. "My king, we came here through the western tunnel and found these three trying to escape. We do not know why they were in the mountain, but we bring them to you now. They have something that belongs to you, for everything under the mountain is now yours." He was careful with his words, trying to pique the king's interest, pandering to his pride and not raise suspicion. He was not sure if the king would readily drink of the water skin. Trolls are not trusting creatures, and it was not uncommon for an ambitious troll to try and take the throne. The king may feel he was being offered poison. The troll king leaned forward. His interest had indeed been piqued. "What have they of mine? I demand it now!" Bold stepped forward and handed to the king Timo's water skin and stepped back, bowing low to the ground. The king looked at the water skin and then to Bold. He did not look pleased. "What is this?" he asked, sounding most irritated. "Do you insult me on the day of my victory? No, my king. I give you the power to heal your people on such a day as this." The king opened the water skin and smelt it. Then, staring at Bold, he proceeded to pour it out onto the floor. "We don't need healing," the king said quietly. "My king," begged Bold, "these waters have power. I see color, and I now know we have all carried a burden we need not. You must trust me." "Trust you?" the king spat. "You have always wanted my crown, Bold. Should I be so stupid to drink your poison? Away from me, all of you. I will deal with you later. For today I celebrate my victory under the mountain." He waved his hand, and many of the large trolls took Bold, Maggot, Eber and the children and led them out of the throne room. The captured offered no resistance. They were led with heavy hearts down the passageways and thrown back into the trolls' prison. A new guard was on duty, and he was not delicate with the prisoners. He grabbed Timo by the hair and tossed him in a cage. He did the same with all of them, including Bold and Maggot. Each had a cage, and each felt utterly dismayed. "What do we do now?" asked Timo, looking around at both his uncle and Bold, who he now trusted a little. Bold sat silently, contemplating the situation. Eber looked across and sighed. "There is little we can do." Timo and Jonathan looked at each other, and then to their uncle, who they had never seen in such a state. Hopeless. "We can break out," they said. "Pick the lock, make a run for it." "There's no way out now," said Bold. "These are troll cages. They do not open easily." He looked at them with a look they had not yet seen on any of the trolls' faces. Kindness. "I will do what I can. We must be patient."